I'm Tony Lockwood, founder of Thompson Wright Partners, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest episode of Inside Track, where I discuss business transformation journeys with leading figures in industry.
After a short break, I'm delighted to be back, and equally delighted to be joined by Theodore Isaacs, or Teddy to his friends. I'll let him introduce himself, so let me bring him onto the call right now. Welcome, Theodore. Great that you've been able to join us today. We've known each other now for probably 18 months or so, and I've always felt that you'd be a great guest to get onto the podcast, so I'm grateful that you've joined us today. You're always very considered and thoughtful, and I find that you tend to really focus upon the key points really quickly. But before we get into the detail of why I wanted you on, do you want to just give everyone a quick introduction to yourself and what you've done in your career to date and how you first got into change and transformation?
Yes. So I specialise in change and transformation leadership and delivery, focusing on portfolio, program, and project management, working with clients to take their strategic objectives, define the once was now change, now transformation blueprints, aligning business objectives, and then working through the myriad of initiatives via portfolio management to understand which are the best ones, and then to arrange and kick off the programs to deliver those changes and those benefits. Began my consulting career at PwC, and my experience is born from PwC and other companies such as HSBC, Deloitte, Deutsche Bank, and most recently Allegis Group. Right. And now, of course, I'm now at Deloitte as head of the transformation office. And the idea is to make sure that all of my work realizes those benefits. So either improving operational efficiency, driving down costs, or improving revenue, and most importantly, improving growth.
Yeah. Interesting. And you're obviously working with some very large global organizations there. It'd be interesting to get the answer to my next question, which is the first question that we ask everyone who comes onto this podcast. How do you define transformation?
I have that discussion every single day, even the managing partners of one of the big four. So I define transformation as taking an organization from state A to state B, and that's obvious. Yeah. But within that is trying to understand those change activities and the operational capabilities, those operational things that are required to be in place to go from state A to state B. And therefore, make sure that the strategic objectives, the ambitions for this transformation make sense and are aligned and can be achieved. So, in essence, making sure that a firm can get from one state to another. That's that new state, the target operating model, the strategy is clearly defined and communicated. So that's me as transformation.
Okay, great. And what do you feel are the main stumbling blocks that you come across when you try to take people from state A to state B?
Actually, it may sound prepared, but I had a conversation about 2 hours ago. So the first thing, and this is what I had discussed in the meeting, and they smiled, was to explain the firm's objectives, communicate the objectives, communicate the strategy, and lead the strategy. If those three, and those are the stumbling blocks, if those three things are taken on board, then depending upon the maturity of finance management, portfolio management, program management, project management, depending upon the maturity of those very important, but let's put now level 2 requirements, then the transformation journey and momentum can start and be maintained.
Yeah, I think leadership is so critical, isn't it, of being able to clearly have that North Star, that vision of where you're trying to go to and stick to it. Be quite relaxed about how you get there, but be crystal clear about where you're trying to get to is a critical element.
Well, I would say almost. Having done large-scale transformations, both global, HSBC, and now at Deloitte. The leadership is not really about understanding the target state, where you're going to go to, the state B.
Yeah.
Leadership is about motivating your C-suite, your managing partner, managing director, peers to understand what is required to make the change work. Because in these large-scale organizations, even if there's a CEO, there isn't always the first amongst equals. Transformation isn't seen as the only thing that's happening in the business. So although the objectives or the ambitions are defined by a CEO and they're approved by the board and by stakeholders, leadership is more about making sure that you can herd the cats and make sure that the cats, those senior people in the big chairs, don't lose faith or get tired of that transformation journey. And that tiredness we call change fatigue, but I've now coined a term, which is also that administration fatigue.
Right.
Because they all know they have to do the administration because they have to report on what's going on. Yeah. But the level of reporting to show that you're on course to deliver transformation, that is where you get that fatigue. You then get that losing sight of the ball, the bouncing ball. And leadership has to make sure that everyone can see, A, how they've agreed to get there and where they are and what is required to do it. And that is the tiring part of leadership. Yeah. You've got to have a clear understanding of what are the transformation activities that must take place and make sure that you can get your colleagues to agree to them and maintain the activities as well as doing their day job.
Yeah, absolutely. And that fatigue is a critical element in lots of transformations, isn't it? It's keeping the momentum.
Precisely.
It's not easy, especially on multiple year transformation programs. So what are the key lessons that you've learned over your career about maintaining that momentum? What are the key things that you try to ensure that you can implement within programs that you're leading?
Good question. The main things to maintain the momentum are things we've been drilled into us from day one. You've got to communicate those quick wins. Yeah. And even those short quick wins, so people can clearly see that progress is being made. Secondly, once again on communication, you've got to continually inform the firm, also the board of the directors, what exactly is happening within all of the transformation programs, so that they have a clear view every week of what is going on. So that they can see that if there's any delay or downtime in their departments or in their teams or in their sub-companies, these are the effects on other programs, in other words, interdependencies, and that is going to impact the momentum by way of some programs not delivering on time, some change requirements being diluted, and some resources that are required have to be shared. Otherwise, once again, you're going to lose the ability to deliver the programs. Now, in addition to the communication, regular communication, it also has to be to repeat the strategy. So the strategy has to be based upon understanding those operational things, capabilities that are required to realize those ambitions or objectives. If you don't continue repeating those, I repeat them in my meetings to the managing partners every 2 weeks. Yeah. Then it's taken for granted by managing partners, and they don't often cascade it to their teams. And so their teams will go ahead and do their own thing, because of course they have experience in doing transformation for 20 years. They haven't been told about interdependencies, and they go ahead and create those ivory towers. And then you have a wonderful collection of change programs that may or may not have realized the benefits, usually not all of the benefits. But has the firm transformed from one state to another? No. Yeah. The transformation failure, change, success. And then lastly, it's making sure that you have a mechanism with which you can clearly help the decision makers, determine whether any of their new transformation ideas are currently in place. And if they're not, are there any similar ones? This might sound obvious, you could call it old school business requirements analysis. Mm. But senior people will have their pet projects, so back to program project management. Yeah. They'll launch an initiative, depending upon their stakeholder value, they'll get the budget, and then they'll try and argue the case that this is important, it's operational, but we can tweak it so it's transformational. And then you then get the loss of that momentum, you get confusion between dependencies, and then the actual budget, where it's millions and multi-millions, then gets lost and moves to other areas. So those are the main aspects of transformation, and you've got to manage, lead, and communicate, and hurdles you've got to overcome. And the only message is lead and communicate. As long, depending upon, as I said before, the maturity of your teams or your third parties involved in that communication journey.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that one of the first things you raised there was maintaining visibility of progress. Yeah. And all too often that doesn't happen in my experience. You know, at lower levels within organisations, it's almost seen to be a failure if you miss a deadline or you miss a milestone or you don't do something, and they try to hide it. And it always comes out at some stage in the future when it's a much bigger issue. So how do you what type of thing do you put in place to almost encourage people to, if it looks like it's at risk, let's shout up and talk about it because we can get something done before it becomes an issue? What sort of things do you do to encourage that within your programs?
One thing that's worked very well in the last 2 years is to use the old-fashioned lessons learned. But more importantly, and more involved, is actually to communicate, once again that word, those transformation successful waypoints, as I call them, have the program directors and or the partners or the team directors summarize the successful implementation, the successful installation, then the successful implementation, and then what they've found needs to be done to maintain the momentum. So this has the effects of cascading the transformation successes and what needs to be done to maintain momentum and the things that can be improved from leadership straight down to the project managers and the resources involved in the change activities. But also, when I established what I call at Deloitte, this Transformation Leadership Council, the managing partners amongst themselves, then have opportunity to stand there and say, this is what I've done, this is what I've found. I've made these amazing financial benefits or reduction in operational activities. So I'm on the way to achieving the firm's target states. And these are the things that I found, having spoken to all of you in prior meetings. And so encouraging that discussion by way of bravado, but also teaching their peer group what works well, you then get that, dare I say it, cross-fertilization of ideas, because they know that at the Transformation Leadership Council, the chair of that is either going to be the UK managing partner or the European managing partner, or even sometimes the global managing partner. So they know they have to step to the plate and explain the successes they've made. So having that very advanced but summarized but prominent lessons learned helps other programs understand what are the aspects or the conflicts amongst the firm and the politics they have to navigate. Now, they all know this, but it's worthwhile getting out in the open. So once again, it's all about communication. But within that, they also explain the strategy. So if they have found that my, as they teased me about at Deloitte, Teddy's transformation universe doesn't quite work because of the culture or the politics, and they've made changes to it, they've explained why this approach works, and straight away we adapt and we evolve the transformation strategy. So it's always increasing. So any client concerns, any resource constraints, any need to change the objectives because the market is changing, or they have to slow down because transformation isn't the only business activity, all these things are fed into the successful chain activities leading towards ideally a successful transformation journey. And these are then discussed in the TLC. And so that cross-fertilization, that communication amongst prominent leaders, knowing that they have to face off to the global, European and UK managing partners, that's the best way of helping to make sure that we adapt and we evolve the strategy. We put in place the beginnings, I'll add beginnings, of those transformation initiatives. And all those initiatives are clearly mapped on that transformation roadmap, what I call, Teddy, is a transformation universe. I get that every single day.
The number of times you said communication highlights the emphasis that you place. But I think what you're talking about is communication in its widest context, really. Where a lot of people will say you've got to communicate and it's all top down, it's briefings and stuff. You're talking about communication as a whole, two-way dialogue, two-way discussion, meetings, as well as the formal sort of communication channels.
Well, it's a bit more than that. I wouldn't say that it's a broad concept. It's understanding what you need to communicate, why you need to communicate it, and then continue communicating it. And that then gives you the scope of your communication. So for me, communicating the objectives of the firm, that's paramount. Otherwise, as I found in HSBC and Deutsche Bank many years ago, but now at Deloitte, people are asking, well, why are we doing this? It's not going to affect the bottom line. This is my main day job. Why are we so certain that the firm needs to change to be in a better position, more agile to achieve the change in market environment? Communicate that continuously. Then the strategy. In some organizations, there are many people like you and I, better, worse, or the same, that have done change and transformation since the year dot. And they will have different strategies, but it's got to be one strategy. So everybody must be agreed that whatever they've learned at companies A and B, consultancy X, Y, Z, this is a way that we are going to deliver this transformation strategy. Communicated all the time, so no one ever forgets that. Whenever they're in briefings, whenever they're talking to the clients, talking to the program delivery teams, or talking amongst themselves, the first thing is, we're going to do this because these are the objectives. This is the strategy. Therefore, this is how we can align our forecast benefits to achieving those objectives. It's the strategy and it works. If they want to change it, they come back to the drawing board. And then lastly, communicating what has been done. So we understand the quick wins. Everyone gets confidence that the strategy works. And therefore, what the senior partner or the global CEO wants to do to transform the firm actually makes sense. And then when you're communicating those quick wins, you're also communicating the next steps. So all of this, although I stress communication, is, as I said, communicating those important aspects of transformation. That's old school project management or program management. But it gets confused or diluted because suddenly people get lost in the clouds about transformation. And then they get lost in the weeds about change. And I always say, well, whether it's transformation or change, you're doing something to make the company work. You promised these benefits to be delivered at a certain time. That's all you've got to remember. And then myself, when I'm brought on board, or other people in the company will then put a strategy around that and will continue communicating it so no one forgets what they have to do. And that's the best way I found so far of either maintaining the momentum, which I'm struggling to now because it's such a big firm, or just trying to re-engage, reignite the transformation momentum. And that's important because, as I said before, transformation and change, there are a myriad of things going on, and a transformation program isn't the only thing for a firm. That's not bringing in the revenue. So you've got to try and keep the eye on the ball. And lastly, that's why, as a transformation leader, decision maker, or thought leader, you have to be in a position where you're either at the decision maker's table or you make decisions. That's why an enhanced enterprise portfolio management office or even a portfolio management office won't cut it. The decision maker or decision-making body has to be in a transformation office. Otherwise, it's just pushing around reports, and then you've got then an additional layer of administration between a decentralized or centralized portfolio team, and a centralized portfolio team, then the European portfolio team, and the global portfolio team. But none of those PMOs have a decision maker. The transformation office has to have the person to decide what to do, and that can't be diluted. And once again, that goes back to transformation. You've got to agree from the get-go.
Yeah.
Although this transformation is new, the program is new, you, Tony, head of Europe, have to get agreement from the board or the CEO that I need to have my transformation office as a decision-making tool. Yeah. All company all the company decisions about whatever they're doing have to flow through me. I won't be a bottleneck, but I have to understand what are the so-called BAU activities or the strategic activities of the firm going to have an impact on the transformation you've asked me to deliver, and vice versa, which once again goes back to communication.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. You take me back to probably the first program I ever got involved in my first career, which was in banking, and they brought McKinsey's in to help work through what the future state could look like, and a 4 or 5 year program of activity was established, and for the majority of that time, at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning, you knew where all of the senior managers and the organisation, the directors of the organisation were, because they were in a transformation board meeting.
Yes.
And the different leaders, the different programme leaders, would go and present between 10 and 12 o'clock on a Thursday morning, and you'd get a yes, no, go away and find this out.
Yes.
And it gave you that clarity. And when it was a yes, everybody had signed it off. So you could just get on. And that programme, which was called Program Columbus, was written up at the time. This was in the 90s. Written up as the way to transform a bank. And if you Google it, it's still out there as a perfect way to drive transformation.
Yes, and in that example you just described, that to me is portfolio management. We're in a meeting, we have so many millions, not giving anything away, to transform our firm. What are the most attractive, achievable, and affordable initiatives that will realize the transformation? You prioritize them, and every periodically, week or every 2 weeks, you're in that meeting going through successes, failures, where are we, how much money do you need, is this still a high priority based upon the criteria which we set to achieve transformation. So portfolio management is key. That is the engine room of making sure that any change or transformation program works, but at a global level, or even European level, actually any level really. If you don't understand where you are on those initiatives and the myriad of programs and their myriad of projects, and they aren't prioritized and they aren't reviewed periodically, often, so as I said, every week, sometimes, or every 2 weeks, monthly maximum, then that's how you lose track of activities, and then you start having transformation fatigue. You then start seeing that you lose momentum, mainly because the work to deliver those changes hasn't been properly reviewed. Something has gone in, so program project management. The implementation, the installation of the business process or the IT solution was great. IT team just threw it over the fence, or the program delivery team threw it over the fence. And I keep telling my colleagues and people I report to that change and transformation is end to end. So just because your program delivery team have delivered a business process or delivered the IT solution, the change program hasn't stopped there. No. And it may sound obvious, but they say, well, our resources have to go elsewhere. So then I say, okay, fine, as part of the prioritization, if we're losing resources, then ideally we have to put this as a risk or deprioritize the program because we haven't got the resources. Oh, Teddy, we can't do that. Exactly. So your resources must stay on board to make sure that the change is adopted, embedded, and realized. So it's the obvious things, but because of this fear or this idea that transformation is, oh my goodness, we're trying to walk on water. And transformation is something that it doesn't always succeed. And it's over 2, 3, or 7 years. That is why communication is required to maintain that momentum, could maintain the drive, still momentum, and also make sure that you are maintaining the ability to prioritize those initiatives to make sure that you always are delivering or checking the risk of failure of those key transformation programs that are going to deliver the transformation you want.
Yeah. I think we've all heard the stories and the statistics about change programs and transformation programs failing 70% of the time.
Yes.
I think when you sort of unwrap that data and the figures behind that, what you typically find is that it's those three things have not been done effectively. The actual process stuff, the technology stuff has been delivered. May or may not be delivered on time or in budget, but it's got there. But it's the, as you say, it's the adoption, it's the embedding, and it's the benefits realization.
Precisely.
Resources have been pulled off, and suddenly when you come and do a lessons learned or a sort of final program review, because they haven't gone that extra element or that final element, not an extra element, that final element, the benefits are diluted. The change, people don't change the ways of working that effectively, and it just either just doesn't land and other stuff comes up and takes over, or you're just battling about it on an ongoing basis for months and months and months.
Precisely that. And that's why what I always try to do is make sure that those responsible of those transformed business services are part of the transformation initiative, the program initiatives, business case. They agree to it from the get-go. They're completely involved in that change program, from program delivery, so from program implementation to the business implementation, to the business change, and that they have worked with the program delivery team to make sure that what they're getting, they can assign their enhanced or new capabilities for their service, or could be new service, to KPIs and critical success factors. So when they are then reporting at their various business meetings as to organizational sustainability, client effectiveness, the increase in client uptake, they can clearly show these success factors for the service or the products we're providing to our clients. These KPIs are measured all the time. They're clearly linked to the change initiatives we agreed upon, clearly linked to the transformation strategy, and clearly linked to the firm's strategic objectives. And so you essentially, there is no stop to change and transformation.
Yeah.
You're always making sure that the end result stays on course and is always tweaked. And that tweaking can be subtle or large scale change, but it doesn't stop. You must have that governance in place. And funnily enough, this is what some consultancies will do on a client site, but because it isn't their day job, their job is to win revenue, work on client sites. That's when the momentum gets in the way. That administration and change fatigue gets in the way, and they say, well, actually, I've got to have my monthly partner review, and I can't have that. I can't have my firm's transformation program affect what I've been brought on to do, which is to bring in revenue and bring in clients. That's always a challenge.
It is. I was going to ask you a question actually, but it's a really great segue into the question. We all come across different people within change and transformation programs from the business, some of whom, shall I say, will leap into the change and really sort of enjoy the process. Others that will come kicking and screaming, and others that just sit on the fence and don't really, don't go with the masses really. So for those that are coming kicking and screaming, and those that are sitting on the fence, a little bit like what you've just described there, what approach do you take to get them to get on the bus and come on the journey with you?
The first thing, and most importantly, you've got to understand and get their buy-in and get the acceptance that you understand the culture and the politics that is in the firm. I was going to say pervasive, but that sounds too negative. That is part of the organization, either a client or internally. If you don't understand the culture and the politics, you can't convince those people who are on the fence or naysayers as to what they have to do and why they have to do it and what's involved. Once you've got once they believe that you understand those minefields, then you've got to work with them, get their advice as to what's the best way to bring the cultural and political difficulties into transformation strategy. Yeah. And then they, with their impetus and their involvement, they then know that they are part of defining that strategy. So they're bought into the strategy. If they've come later on board, then hopefully the critical mass of those senior decision makers will make them realize that this isn't just a hokum strategy that's taken from either one of their clients' proposals or from some external consultant telling them what's new. So culture and politics understanding and being the foundation for the strategy is vital. If you haven't got that, you can't convince anybody that knows what you're talking about. You can't convince anybody that as you understand what are their stakeholder difficulties, and you can't convince anybody that you understand they have a day job to do as well as do the transformation objectives. And lastly, because of the politics, you have to learn and understand from them that, well, Teddy or consultant, this is the business strategy, but it's a manifesto that's brought somebody in, or we voted in the CEO or the person became CEO. Is this manifesto attractive, affordable, and achievable, and is it viable? Yeah. So you've got to work with them to understand that. So politics and culture and understanding is vital. And then after that, once you've convinced them that you know what you're doing, and they have been involved in creating the strategy, and by definition, the blueprints, you've got their buy-in, is in getting their confidence that you are the person that can listen to them and help direct or influence the transformation journey, and that, here it comes again, you can regularly communicate what is going on and what could impact their day jobs or their change initiatives, which are part of the transformation journey, so that they're always involved and always adapting to whatever's going on.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we always finish this podcast with a question that says, what's your one takeaway? But I know what yours is. It's the communication. So I'm going to change the question.
Well, actually, I would say my one takeaway, because communication is the bedrock, is leadership. Right. You've got to have someone in charge, decision maker, who can lead the transformation. I see a difference between managing transformation and leading transformation. Yeah. Managing transformation, you're just amongst your peer group. You've been briefed by Tony, head of the company or CEO, to deliver this transformation. And you're not quite sure how to do it, so you're just managing it. And after a while, people will lose confidence in you because just managing doesn't really get you anywhere. Yeah. If you can grab it by the scruff of the neck and lead, and your peer group, whatever they feel about you, have confidence that yes, Teddy, Tony, whoever is actually leading and directing this rather than just managing a number of activities. That is the main takeaway: leadership or transformation. Understanding what needs to be done rather than getting involved with getting things done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Teddy. That was great. And as I alluded to at the start, very clear, very concise, and
thank you.
Very focused. So thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
We occasionally get questions. Are you happy to engage with people if they pose questions to you?
Yes, always have to. Always want to learn more, because I'm always struggling on something. That's why I reach out to you and the colleagues in our group. There's always something that's going to bite me the next day, and so be prepared for that is very important.
Yeah, I think we're all in that position, aren't we? That we can always learn new things. So
always.
And when you get to the point where you're not learning, then you're probably in a box underground.
Yes. Even then, you can always haunt somebody.
On that positive note, thanks a lot, Teddy, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Super. Take care, Tony. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Teddy. A very thoughtful episode. Thanks for agreeing to share your experience with our listeners. Teddy is a member of the Transformation Leaders Hub, a community exclusively for those working in project, program, change and transformation. If you haven't done so already, go and check it out. We have both free and paid for membership options. If you're like me and have the desire to build and scale a consulting business, check out the Creating Wealth from Consulting assessment and receive an individual report highlighting those areas where you'll need to focus to achieve your ambitions. See the link in the notes below. We are always on the lookout for future guests, so if you'd like to share your experience with our listeners, please do get in touch and we can grab a call to discuss this further. With that, thanks for joining us today, and I look forward to welcoming you back onto a pod in the very near future. Bye for now.